and hopefully start chapter 24. We'll see how it goes. Any questions so far in chapter 23? Okay, what's this diagram? Yep. It talks about mechanisms promoting secretion and release of bile and pancreatic juices. So these are some of the things that happen in order for bile and pancreatic juices to be released as chyme enters where? The small intestine. Now where was chyme? In the stomach. But there has to be something, those signals, those preparatory things I talked about last lecture, that are going to signal the next portion of the digestive process. And one of those things, or several of those things, are also going to open up what? That sphincter muscle. What sphincter muscle is that? The pyloric sphincter muscle, to then empty into the small intestine. So, chyme's going to start into the small intestine, causes the release of a hormone called cholecystokinin, and another one called secretin. And these are released from the duodenal enteroendocrine cells. We already looked at the inside of the small intestine, remember? What was different in the small intestine than the stomach? Yeah, instead of having an inversion of cells to form gastric pits and gastric glands, we have villi. Increase the surface area. Also, remember there's folds that form as well to increase surface area. There's folds not only in the small intestine, but there's folds in the stomach as well. What do they call the folds in the small intestine? In the stomach. They're called rugae. And those folds are going to allow for an increase of surface area in a smaller space. Because of those folds, what can happen to the stomach? It can expand. So when it fills, and you've probably felt the experience maybe once or twice in your lifetime, you can fill it quite a bit, yes? That stretching of those muscles also sends information to the central nervous system about whether or not you should stop putting stuff in there or not. That's a stretch reflex that also helps to stop you from filling the stomach. Sometimes we ignore it, right? Many times we ignore it. Go out to eat way too much food, and then it's time for dessert, right? Should you really eat dessert? No, but it looks good, yes? Your stretch reflex is telling you no, but your eyes are telling you yes. So these are some signals for the digestive process as well. So this diagram shows us how circulatory system can transport some of this good stuff. CCK, red dots, and secretin, the yellow dots, enter the bloodstream. So circulatory system is going to help transport these materials to where they need to go. CCK induces secretin of enzyme-rich pancreatic juices, or secretion, excuse me. I just said secretin, didn't I? Secretion into where? Where are those pancreatic juices going to go? Into the small intestine. But it's going to get stimulation. Those cells have to get stimulated by these chemicals in the circulatory system. Again, these are the guys that are going to prep the next portion of digestion. So understand these steps outlined in figure 23.28. Of course, I love those numbered things, so you might see it as a possible essay question on your next exam. On page 888, table 23.2 is wonderful, isn't it? Why is it wonderful? Because it kind of gives you in small form a lot of the stuff that's being discussed in this chapter. So it's an overview of the functions of the gastrointestinal organs, starting with mouth and accessory organs, salivary glands, and we have the pharynx and esophagus, we have the stomach, small intestine, and the accessory organs we just talked about, the liver and the pancreas and gallbladder, and the large intestine. All of those are on a nice table for you. So another way to narrow everything down for you. Motility in the small intestine is going to help do what? You have 21 feet to get pushed through, right? Motility in the small intestine is kind of important, isn't it? Because I have to work my way through 21 feet now to continue the digestive process, and also what? What's the major thing that's going to happen in the small intestine? Absorption. So the discussion of motility in the small intestine is an important one because it talks about moving substances through the small intestine for the digestive process. Okay? So we have a gastro-ileal reflex described on page 890. And that's going to enhance movement through segments of the ileum. How many different parts of the small intestine are there? You have your what? Duodenum, and jejunum, and ileum. Okay? So we have to get through all of those different portions. And these folds and muscles are going to help do that. If I have a problem with moving things through the small intestine, I'm going to have problems with the digestive process. Certain diseases can sort of attack the lining of the small intestine and cause problems with the absorption of nutrients, and can also cause a great deal of pain and discomfort. One that comes to mind that's sort of coming onto the scene, or we're realizing how many people suffer from it, is a disease called celiac disease. Anybody? There's got to be somebody in class. Your daughter has it. Anybody else? Anybody have it? If you have a lot of problems with pain after you eat, many times you go to the doctors, and doctors will throw you into a category called IBS. You know what IBS is? That means I don't know what the hell's wrong with you. That's IBS. But many of you that fall into that category might have a problem with an allergy to gluten. Many more people are being diagnosed with it because we're finally realizing how many people are actually suffering from it, and it's not just IBS. So one of the things you should pay attention to if you have these problems reoccurring, and you go to the doctors and they say, okay, you have irritable bowel, go on your way. Keep a food log and see what foods bother you. And go to the doctors and ask them to test you for this, because it's a simple blood test. Okay? And so many people suffer from it that go undiagnosed. So if you fall into that category, think about it. And what that does is it disturbs or destroys the linings of your small intestine, and can be problems for you because you have trouble doing what? Yeah, that main thing, absorbing the nutrients from the foods that you eat. You might feel tired all the time, diarrhea, or the opposite can occur, constipation. So problems with the digestive process in general. And that's just one of many digestive issues that you could encounter. Okay, that's the small intestine. We good up to the small intestine? So we have rugae in the stomach, folds. What do they call them in the small intestine? Villi? What's a plicae? Yeah. Folds in the small intestine to rugae, plicae, villi, all to increase surface area so that I can have more absorption taking place and digestion. So we hit the small intestine. We hit the large intestine. How much large intestine do we have? Do we have 21 feet of large intestine? No. Anybody know? 10 to 12-ish feet of large intestine. So most of the absorption has taken place, but we're still not quite done yet. We can still do some breakdown and absorption in the large intestine. But pretty much by the time we hit the large intestine, we've done most of that. What's going to be left in the large intestine? Yeah, most of the stuff that we really can't break down anymore. Although we still can do a little bit in the large intestine. So gross anatomy of the large intestine. And it doesn't always look like this. Actually, it doesn't look like this. When you dissect your pigs, you'll see it doesn't look like this. And that's the reason why you have to dissect your pigs, so you can actually see the anatomy of these systems. It kind of bunches all together on one side or another. Larger tube for sure, still has the same layers. We're going to look at the histology in a minute. But what I'm going to find here is a larger tube that has kind of in pockets or forms pockets due to this Tinea coli, which is a ligament that holds everybody together. The only way to describe it, the only way I can think of is to describe it is, have you ever looked at the curtains in your house? Think about the curtains in your house. You have a straight piece of material, but that straight piece of material goes on a curtain rod. It gets all foldy almost, bunchy, and creates the curtain on your window. You all with me? How do you do that? Do you know? Any sewers in the group? How do you do that? Yeah. You can use elastic. I'm putting her on the spot. What if I took a stitch, like a fat stitch, not a tight stitch, and I made it across the top of that material, and then I pulled it a little bit? I could actually create those bunches. Well, that's kind of what this Tinea coli does to the large intestine, kind of like those curtains. It pulls a little bit tight and creates little bunches. Those little bunches are called hostra. These can be a problem sometimes if we don't or aren't diligent about making sure waste moves through the large intestine at a nice even rate. You know what I'm talking about? Things get caught up there, can be uncomfortable, can't they? Okay. Things can get caught up in those little pockets called hostra, and they can create problems. They can create little out pockets of their own called diverticuli. If there's a lot of pressure associated with trying to push things through the large intestine, that pressure can cause little out pockets of their own. Now those can cause even more problems if what? If stuff gets stuck in them and kind of festers there and causes them to become inflamed. What do we call that? Diverticulitis. Inflammation of those little pockets, diverticuli. Normally you don't have diverticuli. That happens as you get older, and maybe you've been constipated way too many times in your life. Yes? So normally you don't have them. You have hostra, little pockets. But stuff getting caught in those can be extremely uncomfortable. So what are the parts of the large intestine? We enter the large intestine where? At the cecum, way down at the bottom over there. Oh, my pen. Right over here. And then we have the ascending colon, the transversely descending, and we have the sigmoid colon, which dumps into the rectum, and then the anus. So those are the parts, or histology, gross anatomy, excuse me, of the large intestine. Now, what's this thing down here? That's called the vermiform appendix. What's that for? It's not for nothing. It's part of what? Your lymphatic system. So it's lymphoid tissue. It was actually thought to be, way back in our evolution, a portion of the large intestine that produced an enzyme to help break down cellulose. Can you do that now? No. You don't have the enzyme, cellulase, to break down cellulose. What's cellulose? Yeah, it's the cell walls of plants. You probably recognize it more as fiber. Yes? So every time you eat a fruit or a vegetable or a plant, you're eating not only the cells, but the cell walls of those plants. And you break them apart, and mastication and chemical digestion and all that good stuff. But can you actually break down cellulose? No. So why do they keep telling you to eat those damn vegetables and fruits? Exactly, to provide you with not only the stuff on the inside, because the stuff on the insides of those cells is very important. There's a lot of important vitamins and minerals and nutrients for you to lead a healthy life. But those cell walls add bulk. Bulk. Bulk is good, because bulk is going to provide you with a means to do what? Anybody in nutrition class? Move things what? Move things along. Which, if you have had any problems with not being able to move things along, you understand how uncomfortable that can be. So it provides bulk, which causes things to move through the digestive system at a normal rate. So fiber is very important. How many grams of fiber should you have a day? Anybody know? 30. I'm guessing most of you people in this class don't even get close. Yes? Think back to yesterday's meals. How many of you didn't have a vegetable? Be honest. Vegetable matter in yesterday's meal. No vegetables? How about some fruit? Did you have any fruit? Good. How many? 5? Probably not. So fruits and vegetables are very important. They're very important not only for the nutrients they give you, but they're very important to move things through the digestive system at a normal rate. If you don't do that, you're going to run into problems. I guarantee you, especially as you get older, you're going to run into problems with constipation and the forming of diverticuli and diverticulosis and diverticulitis, and you don't want to even go there. So, while you're young, eat right. Because when you're older, you're going to pay. Yes? So, they talk about homeostatic imbalances, appendicitis. Inflammation of that appendix can be an issue. It's kind of a place where things like to get caught up every once in a while. And just like with diverticulitis, if something gets caught up in that appendix, what's going to happen to it? It's going to become inflamed, and it's going to cause a problem. It has to be removed before it does what? Bursts. It bursts. Guess what? It lets out into your peritoneal cavity. All kinds of nasty stuff that's hanging out in your large intestine. So that's not a good thing. So they talk about appendicitis. There are some very important things that, besides the structure of the large intestine, that we need to know. And that is the fact that there is bacteria in the large intestine that are going to help with the digestive process. Not all bacteria is bad, yes? The bacteria that hangs out in the large intestine, that's good sometimes, unless it's a foreign bacteria, and then that can cause problems. But the normal flora or bacterial flora that they talk about on page 893 of your textbook is a group of bacteria that is going to actually help you end or finish up your digestive process. It's going to be able to break down some things you weren't able to break down and release some very important vitamins for you. Some vitamins. Anybody take a guess? Yeah, some of your B vitamins. So B vitamins, big deal. Who needs those? You need them. For what? For cells to do what? Remember when you were making red blood cells and you were making hemoglobin for yourself? Did B vitamins come into play there? Say yes. Good. So B vitamins are very important for hemoglobin production. That's just one thing that comes to the top of my head. That's kind of important to carry what? Yeah, all your respiratory gases. Feel a little tired? Maybe you could use some B vitamins. Where might you get those B vitamins? No 5-hour energy. Try some fruits and vegetables every once in a while. Okay? So the flora, normal flora, these bacteria in your large intestine are going to help with the digestive process. They are very important for things like the absorption of those B vitamins. So it talks about digestive process occurring in the large intestine, motility of the large intestine, controlled by who? Who controls motility in the large intestine? Look on page 894, figure 23.31. Yeah, it's your central nervous system. So we control some of these muscles that we're going to find down here. Again, sphincter muscles in the anal canal. And when I get to the point where I have enough bulk in the large intestine and it's moved through to the end of the large intestine in the sigmoid colon region, there's a little valve called the rectal valve. And that's going to help keep everything in place until it's time to eliminate it. Anybody ever have a problem with hemorrhoids? Yeah, nobody's going to raise their hand. Okay, just, you can raise your hand internally. Sometimes we have a problem with hemorrhoids during childbearing years. Those of you who have never had a child, I'm going to describe what it feels like to give birth. Well, I can't really do that, but I can kind of give you an idea. When it's time for you to push, it's kind of like having the most giant bowel movement you've ever had in your entire life. That's the best way to describe it. Girls, are you with me that have had the children? Okay? You go to the birthing class and you ask the silly question to the woman, what's it going to feel like? And she kind of skirts around the whole thing. And, well, you'll know, dear, when it's time. That's what it feels like. When it's time to push, you're going to push, and those muscles are going to help you push. Now, pushing out a child is a big bowel movement, yes? So you might have problems with inflammation in those areas. Those hemorrhoidal tissues might become inflamed. Some of those blood vessels in that area may burst and cause inflammation, which then causes some problems sitting down. Yes? What else can cause hemorrhoids besides giving birth? Remember I said big bowel movements, yes? So if you have problems with not enough fiber and not enough bulk in your diet, you can have problems because you're constantly having to strain for bowel movements, and that can also cause problems in that region. So that's where you might get those good old hemorrhoids. To avoid those hemorrhoids, what should we do? Eat some fruits and vegetables. Get some fiber in there every once in a while. So this is a picture of the end of the digestive tract. Varicose veins in the legs? Well, that's a varicose vein is an inflamed vein area, and they call them hemorrhoids because they're veins that are inflamed in the hemorrhoidal tissues. All right, so that is a picture of some of the membranes. Okay, where am I going? Okay. So, membranes I discussed before, the omentums. Remember I said they were like little, what did I say they were like? Kind of like aprons that cover the gastrointestinal region. These omentums are going to help keep everything in place, also provide some important materials for the muscles that are constantly moving or moving during the digestive process. So we see little fat tabs in the omentums as well. The mesentery is a group, it's like a double-layered group of membranes that's going to help hold everybody together. This is a diagram that shows us some of the digestive organs that we've talked about. We see this omentum called the lesser omentum holding those guys up at the beginning, the liver, the stomach, and then breaking down into the lower area. The lower area is going to be covered, and this is all flapped up in this diagram, by the greater omentum. That's kind of like the apron I was talking about. So omentums are going to hold together all of the organs in the abdominal pelvic cavity. The mesentery is going to hold together the small intestine. And then this membrane called the mesocolon is going to hold together what? The large intestine, exactly. And these membranes, again, are serous membranes that hold everybody together. Remember, I have to throw out my 21 feet of small intestine? Well, I have to reel it in and hold it together in the abdominal pelvic cavity. Same with my 12 feet of large intestine. So the mesentery holds together the small, the mesocolon holds together the large, and these mesenteries are part of this very elaborate group of membranes in the mesentery. Lesser omentum, transverse mesocolon, the mesentery itself, greater omentums, lesser omentums. The visceral peritoneum is what? Visceral. Lining the organs. Parietal, lining the cavity. So all of these membranes, there's a whole bunch of them because there's a whole bunch of stuff down there, are holding together the abdominal pelvic cavity organs. You can see them all in that diagram. Okay, so we talked about bacterial flora, we've talked about the digestive process in the large intestine. Motility is extremely important, and this reflex is going to help get rid of everything at the end. So at the end, when we've reached the end of the line, we can absorb no more. We've gotten our B vitamins, our normal flora has helped us do that. What else do I absorb in the large intestine? Yeah, I'm also going to absorb some water and electrolytes in the small intestine as well. And sometimes what happens when we have problems not being able to do this? If things are moving too quickly and we don't have time to absorb it, what happens? Diarrhea. Now, what do those medications do you think, that you take for diarrhea? What do you think they do? They don't dehydrate you. They slow down the peristaltic contractions of your intestines so that you have a chance to do what? Absorb the efficient amount of water that you need. So that when you take Pepto-Bismol or you take Imodium or whatever else they have on the market, that's what you're doing. You're slowing it down so that you can properly absorb the amount of water and electrolytes. Frequent diarrhea that goes unchecked can cause what to happen? Dehydration and electrolyte imbalances. So there's some products on the market that you're given when you go through this that can help replenish some of your fluid and electrolytes. Things like Pedialyte, for example, which is a better option than one that you probably thought of first, Gatorade. Unfortunately, too many sugars can also cause motility in your intestines as well. So, fad diet. Let's pick one. Atkins. What does the Atkins diet tout? Really low carbohydrates, right? Like silly low carbohydrates. You can eat all the bacon and beef you want. But what might be a problem? Big time constipation. Because carbohydrates also tend to cause movement. And they add what to your diet? Fiber. So will you lose weight with the Atkins diet? Yes. Is it good for you? No. So be careful, because carbohydrates help with this movement. Yes?
What about those recipes for
Cleansing. That's something we could discuss for many, many classes as well. I think that causing a massive movement through your digestive system at a rapid rate frequently is bad. One of the reasons why, what do you think you get rid of too many of when you do that? Huh? Well, you get rid of nutrients. The premises behind it is I'm going to clean out anything that might get caught up in the hostra. That's basically the premises of it. But what else do you get rid of too fast? You get rid of your fluids too fast. You get rid of your electrolytes, vitamins, all that good stuff too fast. But even more importantly, you get rid of way too many of your normal flora, which is bad. Better, I think, in my opinion, probiotics. They're going to help keep your bowel movements regular. They're going to help keep you regular and make sure that your normal flora stays in check. Be careful with those cleansing things, you know. Will you lose weight? Yeah. You'll gain it back the minute you start eating. Yes? Yeah, anything that keeps you moving on a regular basis. But remember, not too much, because you still have to give time for that reabsorption of vitamins and water. You don't want to have diarrhea on a regular basis. Not to be disgusting, but that's not what you want. If whatever you're doing causes you to have that, then you need to do something a little bit different. Okay? So this diagram shows us the reflex of defecation. Again, we have to have some sort of signal that is going to open up the last of the what? Sphincter muscles. And there is a reflex, a connection, a neural reflex. And neurons in the peripheral nervous system have myelin sheaths, don't they? Do they always have that the minute you're born? All your neuron pathways have myelin sheaths the second you're born? No. This is one. It takes time to myelinate. This reflex takes time to myelinate. Do you know what I'm talking about? How many years? Gifted 2, 3. 2 to 3 years before I actually have control over this reflex. So when you're born, do you have control over that sphincter muscle? No. So things fill up, they just flow through. That's why you have to wear diapers. Myelination typically takes place of this particular reflex between 2 and 3 years-ish. Ish, I say. Don't try to force those kids to use that potty before they're ready. No amount of Cheerios or any little videos are going to do that, right? Those of you who have gone through the experience understand what I mean. Those of you, hopefully, who will go through it someday in your lives in the future, remember what I just said. So that takes time. As an aside, what you need to do when your child starts to get interested in the potty is after meals, because this is typically when you add bulk to the digestive system, and that's typically when we're going to have a bowel movement, after we've added something to it. So after meals, when the child gets to the right age, what do? Sit them on the potty. There you go. And after a while, they finally get the hint that, oh, okay, this is where I'm supposed to go and not in my pants. But they won't do that before this particular pathway is fully myelinated. So you can't force that to go before it's time. I know we all want to do that, especially when our kids hit 2, we think, okay. Sometimes it takes a little longer. So this is the defecation reflex. Know that. Chemical digestion. Any questions? So we've already gotten to the end of the line, yes? Yes, ma'am. It just gets weak. So the trap, no, it doesn't demyelinate, but the trap door doesn't stay as shut as it should. Let's say that. Sphincter muscles start to weaken. So we kind of go in reverse as we get older. A good cough can cause a problem, both in the renal system and, the urinary system, and for women who have had children, that may come earlier, sorry. And with the digestive system as well. I'm embarrassing you, aren't I, Al? Oh my God, I can't believe she's saying this stuff. All right, so, the muscles can weaken, the sphincter muscles can weaken as we get older. So, you can exercise those too, by the way. And if you know what a Kegel is, yes, you are actually exercising those muscles to help strengthen them when they've become weakened. So you can do that. Boys, if you want to know what a Kegel is, ask some woman who's already had children. So, the next part of the day of the book, then, we've gotten to the end of the line. Does anybody have any questions about from beginning to end? No? Okay. Let's talk about physiology of chemical digestion and absorption. You know this already, yes? You better, because you have a lab exam this week. If you haven't already taken your lab exam, you will have a lab exam that will have this information on it, so you better know it. Chemical digestion. Mechanisms of chemical digestion, enzymatic hydrolysis. Basically, we're adding enzymes to the mix to help break apart hydrolysis. We're going back to our chemistry roots now. Hydro what? Hydro what? Hydrolysis. Hydrolysis. Breakdown of large molecules to smaller molecules. So that's what this portion of the chapter talks about. So, chemical digestion of carbohydrates is what we're going to talk about first. We want to have monosaccharides. Who had breakfast this morning? See, way too few hands raised in the air. That's another problem with the world. You have to start your metabolism going. You need to eat breakfast. You don't have to eat bacon and eggs and toast and juice. You need to have something in your body to get your metabolism going. Yes? Those of you that fall asleep through lecture, try eating breakfast every once in a while. And breakfast is not coffee with sugar in it. Okay? No.
Does it work though? Like to start your metabolism?
A little bit. Not a lot. So, what we want to do, and for most of us, we need to ingest 200 to 600 grams of carbohydrates each day in order to have a healthy amount of these monosaccharides. So we're going back and we're looking at chemistry again. So, give me some breakfast foods that might have carbohydrates in them. Bagels, toast, cereal, oatmeal, all those guys, carbohydrates. But they're complex carbohydrates. So in the digestive process and the chemical digestion of these carbohydrates, our goal is to take big things and make them small. Digestion starts right in the mouth. It's initiated by saliva. So we're going to start this process right in the mouth. And one of the things that I'm going to secrete in saliva that's going to help with the digestive process is salivary amylase. Amylase is going to help break down what? Yep. Polysaccharides. We're going to start breaking them into disaccharides and eventually monosaccharides. So this is the process in which I go through, and all of the different organs of the digestive system and accessory organs of the digestive system that are going to help me break these down. So starches, give me an example of a starch. Who? Pasta, potatoes, corn. Corn is a starch. Some vegetables, a lot of vegetables have different complex carbohydrates in them. All of the enzymes listed here are going to help me break them down into monosaccharides. Now, some very common disaccharides are things like sucrose. And you probably had some sucrose today already if you had your coffee with cream and sugar, right? Table sugar is what? Sucrose. Sucrose is a disaccharide. Glucose and fructose. Yes? That's sucrose. So I need enzymes specific to break them down. Sucrase is going to break down sucrose. Maltose is another disaccharide, 2 glucoses. We need what to break it down? Maltase. And lactose is fructose and, is it galactose? Galactose and glucose, right? And what do I need to break down lactose? Lactase. Anybody lactose intolerant? Yeah. So what do you maybe lack? Now, I either make lactase and I don't make it right, or I don't make enough of it. So I have a problem breaking down that disaccharide. Where do I find lactose? Milk, dairy products. So some people have a problem breaking that down. They actually sell over the counter the enzyme that you can consume when you consume dairy products. That's going to help break those down for you. It's okay, it's not completely efficient, but it does alleviate some of the symptoms. Now, when I can't break down molecules properly, some of the symptoms are a great deal of gas, bloating, diarrhea. Not good, right? So, if I don't have the proper enzyme, I'm not going to be able to break down that substance. So you already know these? Good, because you're going to have to know them for your lecture test as well. Say it again. You're just going to pass it through. Because it's like passing things bigger through a doorway than should be. So they can cause a buildup of gas because of different chemical reactions that happen trying to continue to break them down. You produce a lot of gas. And then you have trouble, because they're too large going through the system, you have trouble efficiently absorbing the water you should, because they kind of get in the way. So that's where the diarrhea comes in. Does that make sense? All right, so everybody good with carbohydrates? How about proteins? Proteins are what? Chains of who? Amino acids. They're polypeptides. Do you have any in your breakfast food today? No proteins? Eggs. Some protein, other protein-like materials, maybe some yogurt. No? Proteins, peanut butter, that's a good one. Proteins are important as well because they are what you are made of. Yes? Proteins. But the proteins that I take in aren't in the form in which I need them. The amino acids aren't in the right order. So what do I have to do? Break them down into their building blocks. And I have to use some of the substances from metabolism of others to make some of the amino acids I need to make my proteins as well. What are the amino acids that I take in or have to take in because I can't make them myself? What do we call those? Yep, they're called essential amino acids, and there's about 9 of them that you have to get from your food because you can't make them yourself. So you should do some investigating and making sure that you get your essential amino acids in the foods that you eat. Now, a complete protein is something that's similar to you. Any ideas? Meat. They're the no-brainer proteins, right? I eat those, I know I get all my amino acids, I'm good. But do you have to eat meat to live a healthy lifestyle? No. You can eat vegetables and grains and be just as healthy and get all of the amino acids you need. But you have to be an educated vegetarian, don't you? You can't just go and eat lettuce and get all the amino acids that you need, right? That's not going to work. So you have to mix and match foods. What's one of the better mixes? And you see this a lot in vegetarian meals. A grain and something else. Beans and rice. And that combination gives us a really good mix of the amino acids that we need for a healthful diet. So, proteins, pepsin in the stomach. And it's only going to work if I have what? Hydrochloric acid. That's going to break things into larger polypeptides. And then as we move along in the small intestine, we have things like trypsin and chymotrypsin and carboxypeptidases that are going to help break down larger polypeptides into smaller polypeptides. And then the brush border enzymes in the small intestine produce enzymes like aminopeptidase, carboxypeptidase, and dipeptidases, all of which are going to then break things into what? Those amino acids that I can then absorb into the circulatory system and use to build my proteins. Where do I build proteins? In the cells. What's the process called? Transcription and translation, or protein synthesis. Remember that? And who's going to help me do that? DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. You remember all this good stuff, don't you? The next thing the book talks about is lipid digestion. Now, lipids need a kind of a two-step process. We discussed this already. Let's see if you remember it. They all kind of hang together because they're hydrophobic in a big ball. So what do I have to do? I have to break them apart. I have to emulsify them. So I have to emulsify fats, and that's going to begin where? Small intestine, with the help of who? Bile, which is produced where? In the liver. It's stored and concentrated in the gallbladder. So secreted into the small intestine. We have to emulsify fats before we add enzymes to them and break them down. So we have to break them apart before we break them down. They're made of what? Lipids are made of what? No, lipids are fats. Lipids are made of what? Glycerol and fatty acids. So that's what I'm after with the enzymes. So, glycerol and fatty acids. We're going to talk about their absorption in a moment. But the last thing we're going to talk about is the chemical digestion of nucleic acids. What's a nucleic acid? DNA, RNA. What are they made of? Phosphate, sugar, nitrogenous base. What's that called? We're dusting off some major brain cells. Those three little bits together are called nucleotides. That's what we're after. Now, the other day in class I said, is there anything you eat that hasn't at one time been alive? And we didn't have a big long list, did we? Yeah, dirt and salt is what we got, right? So everything else has what? DNA, because it came from, at one point, cells of some kind of another. So nucleic acids is what we're breaking down, and we're using enzymes from the pancreas, which are secreted into the small intestine, and we are using enzymes which are produced by the brush border in the small intestine. Okay? Everybody good? All right, absorption. So, absorption is going to take place in where? Small intestine. Most of it's going to take place in the small intestine. This particular diagram is protein digestion and absorption in the small intestine. So we see sodium ions, your electrolytes, are going to help with the absorptive process of many of these materials from the small intestine. That's why it's very important not to disrupt your electrolyte balance, because your electrolyte balance is going to be involved in many different chemical reactions. We've already talked about the fact that electrolyte balance is important in nerve impulses, for example, but it's also important in the absorptive process in the small intestine. So amino acids are going to be absorbed into cells by endocytosis and by exocytosis, thrown into the circulatory system, where they're going to be traveled, where they are going to travel to different tissue for use in the cells throughout the body. So we have active and passive processes that are going to help with absorption of nutrients from the small intestine. And we see both of those in this diagram. Lipids. Well, carbohydrate absorption, same deal. They talk about that on page 899. So those are a little bit easier to absorb through the cells of the small intestine and put into the circulatory system. They tend to be a little bit smaller, but through passive and active transport, endocytosis, exocytosis, we're going to absorb into the circulatory system as well. Lipid absorption is a little bit different. We kind of touched on that in the last lecture, but lipid absorption involves a couple of other very important molecules. Numbers again. We might see that one as an essay question as well. So large fat globules have to be emulsified first. I have to break them apart before I break them down. And who's going to help me do that? Bile salts. You can see they sort of surround lipid molecules to help transport them through a fluid medium. If they didn't have some help being transported, what would happen to them? Just like oil and water, just like in your test tube in lab, they would separate, kind of hang out on the ends, and not get put into fluid as easily. So, a couple of different structures are going to help with lipid absorption. First of all, we have something called micelles. And micelles are made up of substances, including bile salts, that are going to help surround those lipid molecules and transport them through a fluid medium. So those are described on page 899. So the micelles are then going to allow for transport into the cells. Those are the cells, the absorptive cells, that line the villi of the small intestine. Fatty acids and monoglycerides leave the micelles and diffuse into the epithelial cells. Again, these are the epithelial cells that surround or cover the villi of the small intestine. What kind of epithelial cells are they again? Simple columnar epithelials. And once they enter the cells, they're going to form a new package. They're going to recombine with the help of those Golgi apparatus and endoplasmic reticulum inside those cells. And they're going to form another little unit called a chylomicron. Now the chylomicrons are the things that the cell is then going to spit out. And these guys contain the lipid that I need for transport. So through exocytosis, they're going to leave the cells that line the villi, and they're going to enter the fluid in those little finger-like projections. They are going to be taken up by what circulatory or lymphatic system? The lymphatic system. And the portion of the lymphatic system we're going to find in the villi is called the lacteal. It's got that little flap-like structure that's going to allow those chylomicrons to make it into the lymph. And once I get into lymph, where am I then going to go? First I have to make it through what? Where was most of the stuff going to pass that got absorbed into the circulatory system from the small intestine? Where does it have to go first before it kind of makes its way around? Yeah, it's got to bypass, it's got to go through the liver. In the lymphatics, where am I going to go? After I make it through the liver, I have to then eventually get dumped into the circulatory system, and we mentioned that the other day, into what? Those thoracic ducts, right and left. And if you don't remember the travels I need to take, go back and take a peek at chapter 20. So, nucleic acid absorption, again, transported actively across the epithelial by very specific carriers. Vitamin absorption, what's vitamins doing for me? Why are vitamins important? They don't give us energy directly. They aren't calories, but they're extremely important. For what? Metabolism, reactions, many different reactions of metabolism, formation of red blood cells, clotting, you name it. We need vitamins for it. So it's important that we absorb vitamins through the digestive process as well. Some of those vitamins are going to be absorbed in the large intestine. Something called intrinsic factor produced by the stomach is going to help with the absorption of B vitamins. So all of these vitamins absorbed through the digestive process are extremely important. They are going to help different enzyme systems in reactions of metabolism. Do you know what they call vitamins? Nutrition class people? Nobody? Everybody's in a coma? They call them coenzymes. They're going to help other enzymes perform their jobs. And then they talk about electrolyte absorption, which again is important for other reactions of metabolism. Things like ferritin and transferrin are helpers with what? Iron. Is that important? We don't really need iron, do we? Why? Yeah, it's kind of like a very important part of the hemoglobin molecule. It's a central portion of the heme portion of the hemoglobin molecule, which is really kind of important to transport respiratory gases. You feeling tired, anyone? Maybe it's because you didn't eat breakfast, or maybe it's because you might have a deficiency in some of these things. So, you should take nutrition class to find out what you need to eat. Water absorption, is that important? Yes. So about 9 liters of water come from your gastrointestinal tract a day. That's quite a bit. So if you only had food to eat, like the normal food you have, and you didn't have much water, would you survive? Yeah, you'd still survive for a while because you get some water from the foods that you eat. Unless you're eating all dehydrated foods, then that's not good, right? So you do get quite a bit of water from the foods that you eat. Malabsorption of nutrients is also discussed. And again, if you don't have the right building blocks to build your building, you are going to build a shoddy building. Correct? So if you don't have the amino acids you need to make your proteins, you're not going to make your proteins right, and they're not going to work the way they should. If you don't have the carbohydrates you need to make enough energy to do all this stuff that you need to do on a daily basis, you're not going to do it efficiently. If you don't have the lipids that you need as structural building blocks and energy molecules to build your building, you're not going to have the building that you should have. And of course, if you don't have the nucleic acids that you need, you're not going to be able to make new DNA and make RNA. And when you make new cells, are they going to have good DNA? Ah, they might have some mistakes, some mutations. Oh, mutations? That's a problem. That might lead to cells that don't function properly, right? Some cells that don't function properly can turn into some real nasty cells. Anybody know their names? Ah, so all this building material stuff, might be important. Yes? Okay, what's this? Up on the board. Embryonic development of the digestive system. Okay, there we go, that's done. You have, by the way, as you develop, you have a yolk sac, just like a what? Just like a chicken's egg. That yolk sac's going to help you out with some very important nutrients while you develop. Just wanted to point that out. And that's good. That's the digestive system. Don't forget some of the really good tables in this chapter. Table 23.1 with all of the good stuff in it. Table 23.2 with all of its good stuff in it. Control of small intestinal motility has its own nice little diagram. Little table 23.3. And we are done with chapter 24. 23, whatever the heck we're done with. How about some clicker questions? Say it again. General idea, 23.1. Yeah, I have a general idea where they are and what they stimulate. Alrighty. And don't go away after clicker questions because we're going to start chapter 24. Don't give me well. Listen, I have a temperature of 99.5 and I'm here, so be quiet. All right, number one, the esophagus is a part of the what? While the pancreas is considered a or an what when it comes to the digestive system? A, the alimentary canal, accessory digestive organ. B, the stomach or propulsion organ. C, accessory organs, alimentary canal component. Or D, pharynx and mechanical digestive organ. How many bodies do we have today? Is that it? Everybody pick? 31's our number? No? 32? 32? Going once. Going twice. Sold. What's the answer? The answer is A. Very good. All right, number two, the majority of absorption occurs in the A, stomach, B, small intestine, C, large intestine, or D, mouth. Okay, what's the answer? B, small intestine. Come on, display. Remember, the majority of absorption does not take place in the mouth. All right. Number three, the majority of blank occurs in the mouth, stomach, and small intestine. Oh, wait a minute. Let me start it. A, ingestion. B, chemical digestion. C, mechanical digestion. Or D, absorption. Come on. You can do it. Good job. What's the answer? C. Remember, it's mouth. How much digestion takes place in the mouth? Most of it, it's mechanical, right? So if mouth is included in that list, yes? No, not in the mouth. Only a little bit in the mouth. All we do in the mouth is throw amylase in there. Yes? So the majority of the mechanical digestion would be the answer. C. You still have mechanical digestion in the small intestine too. If it just said small intestine, the answer would be what? It would be B. Chemical digestion. Does that make sense? But mouth. If I add mouth to the list, it can't be chemical digestion. It's going to start the process, but those enzymes get deactivated the minute they hit the stomach. Yeah, it's a nasty question. I would never ask that on a test. But mechanical digestion is also a major portion of digestion. Okay? So you have the majority of the mechanical digestion occurs in the mouth, stomach, and small intestine. If I put chemical digestion into that, it's not right, because the majority does not take place in the mouth and the stomach. The majority of chemical digestion takes place in the small intestine. So it wouldn't wash for the other two choices in that choice. That is a cruel question, and I never would ask that on a test. But on a clicker test, it's okay. So, the next one, stimuli that regulate gastrointestinal tract activity are generated by A, the central nervous system, B, chemoreceptors in the gut, C, the enteric nerve plexus, or D, all of the above. All right, what's the answer? D, all of the above. So all of those things are going to help stimulate the gastrointestinal tract, not just the central nervous system. So D, all of the above. All right, choose the answer that lists the 4 layers of the wall of the alimentary canal in the appropriate order from innermost to outermost. I'll give you some time on this one. So, innermost to outermost. Oh, wait a minute, start it. That would help. Mucosa, submucosa, muscularis externa, and serosa. B, the submucosa, mucosa, serosa, muscularis externa. C, serosa, mucosa, muscularis externa, and submucosa. And D, muscularis externa, submucosa, serosa, and mucosa. So remember, we're going from the inside out. Bless you. Okay, what's the answer? A. Oh, now there's 32. Has it 32? I thought it was 31. I'm all confused, Al. What am I going to do? The answer's A. Mucosa's in the right there on the mucus lining of the lumen. So the only choice, that was the first one. Should have stopped right there. All right, a couple more. Which of the following types of epithelial tissue is most predominant throughout the digestive tract? A, simple squamous. B, stratified squamous. C, simple columnar. Or D, simple cuboidal. Predominant throughout the digestive tract. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Come on, 32, push a button. All right. Tough, tough. What's the answer? C. Simple columnar. All right, next one. Chemical digestion is initiated started in the A, mouth, B, stomach, C, small intestine, D, large intestine. You better get it right. 5, 4, 3. What happened to 31 and 32? Come on, 32. All right, 32 disappeared. Display. What's the answer? A. Initiate means start. So how does the digestion process start? When you spit all over your food and create a what? A bolus. So it is started in the mouth. All right. That's good enough. All right. Chat. Well, maybe, I don't know. All right, go away. All right, so we'll have a quiz Tuesday on Chapter 23. We'll start Chapter 24, and we'll see how it goes there to decide when we're going to have our next exam.